I saw her again at the cafe on Tuesday morning, the kind of place that smells faintly of burnt toast and cinnamon, where chairs creak if you shift too much. She was sitting by the window, like always, a paperback half open and her reading glasses resting on top of her head. She never actually read much. Mostly, she just looked outside, stirring her coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. I wasn't supposed to notice her this much. But I did. Every week, same table, same time, always alone. My mom's best friend, Lana. I'd known her since I was a kid, in a peripheral sort of way. She used to come over during holidays with casseroles and advice nobody asked for. But lately, it was just her and me crossing paths here. By coincidence, or maybe some things I didn't want to name yet. "Morning," I said, as I passed her table. She looked up, smiling the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You again. Don't you have a real job, Rafi?" "I freelance," I said, pretending to scroll through my phone. "Which means I can drink bad coffee at 10 a.m. and call it research." She laughed, softly, like she didn't want anyone to notice. Then she nodded toward the counter. "They'll remember your order before mine, I bet." And she was right. When I stepped up, the barista said, "Iced Americano, right?" without looking. When I sat across from her, not invited but not told not to, she nudged her book aside. "You always sit here when I'm here." I could say the same. Her eyebrow lifted, amused, but her hand went still around her mug. That tiny stillness made my chest feel unreasonably tight. I didn't mean to make it sound like flirting. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just a tired woman and a lonely man filling silence before noon. Still, I noticed the small things. The chipped nail polish, her hair pulled up too quickly that morning. The faint crease in her wrist where her watch usually sat. She caught me looking once. I folded my napkin into a small square just to have something to do. "Your mom said you've been working from home lately," she said, voice light but careful. "Yeah, trying to get a new project started." She nodded, then after a pause, "That kind of work can make you forget how to talk to people." I smiled. "That obvious?" "Only little," she said, and her eyes softened. We talked about nothing for a while. The weather, her neighbor's cat, the broken heater in her car. Each topic drifted into quiet, but not an awkward one. More like both of us were aware of what not to say. When she got up to leave, she hesitated before slipping her book into her bag. "Hey," I said, surprising even myself. "Same time Thursday." Her eyes flicked to me, unreadable. Then she exhaled. A long quiet sound like someone remembering something they shouldn't. "Rafi," she said slowly, "I'll regret this." I didn't think. I just smiled, half nervous, half certain. "Not with me." She looked at me for a long second, then turned toward the door. The bell above it chimed as she left, and for a moment, I just sat there staring at her empty chair. My phone buzzed then, a message from her number. "Next time, you're buying." I didn't reply. Just stared at the words until the screen dimmed, a stupid smile caught somewhere between my breath and my chest. I didn't plan on seeing her again so soon. But Thursday came, and somehow my feet just went. She was already there, same table, same window, her scarf folded neatly beside her cup. The steam curled toward her face like it wanted to stay close. I hesitated at the door for a second, pretending to check my phone, before she noticed me. "You're late," she said. "Didn't know we had a schedule." "You said it," she said, smiling, but there was a small, uncertain flicker in her voice. I sat down. The air between us was calm but alert, like standing near a closed door you're not sure you're supposed to open. She told me about her work. She runs a small interior shop now. Said she paints the display walls herself because she doesn't trust anyone else's sense of shade. Her hands moved as she spoke, slow and deliberate. There was paint caught under one of her nails. For some reason, that detail felt intimate. I told her about a project I dropped halfway through. A series of illustrations that were supposed to be about connection. I laughed at the word, because lately, it felt like a concept for other people. She didn't laugh. "Connection isn't supposed to be clean," she said quietly. "It's supposed to make you trip a little." Then she looked out the window, as if she'd said too much. Later, when she stood to leave, she realized her scarf had brushed against a coffee spill. I took it from her before she could reach for a napkin. "Let me," I said, dabbing gently at the edge. The fabric was soft, so was the sound of her breath when I handed it back. "Thanks," she said after a pause. "Your mom would have my head if she saw us sitting here." It was half a joke, but her eyes didn't match her tone. "Then it's good she's not here," I said before I could stop myself. A silence fell, not uncomfortable, just aware. She broke it with a small laugh. "You shouldn't say things like that. You shouldn't look at me like that," I almost said. But I didn't. Instead, I stirred my coffee until it went cold. We walked out together, her steps slow, measured. At the corner, she stopped. "You know," she said, looking toward the streetlight flickering above us, "I used to sit here with your mom sometimes. Years ago. You were still in school." She smiled, but it was tinged with something else. Nostalgia, maybe regret. Time really does slip away when you're not paying attention. I wanted to tell her I was paying attention now. To everything, her voice, her hands, the faint scent of paint and coffee that clung to her coat. But instead, I just said, "See you next week." She hesitated, then reached out, just for a second, to fix the collar of my jacket. Her fingers brushed my neck, light and hurried. "Try not to make me regret it," she whispered. And then she was gone. I stood there a long time, hands still hovering near my collar, like I could keep the warmth she left behind. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next week, she wasn't at the cafe. I told myself it didn't matter. That maybe she was busy, maybe she'd gone to the city. But I still found myself walking past her shop twice that day, pretending to look at the window display, a vase, a mirror, my own reflection looking a little too expectant. When she finally texted 2 days later, "Coffee tomorrow, if you're free," I answered faster than I should have. She was already seated when I arrived, her hair tied low this time, like she'd decided not to bother too much. The scarf from last week was missing. "You disappeared," I said. I needed to think. She said it like she was still thinking. Her voice had that low, thoughtful edge. The kind that meant she'd almost changed her mind about coming. We sat there in small talk that couldn't hide the space between us. Then she asked, "Does your mother know we see each other like this?" I nearly laughed. "We're just having coffee." She murmured, stirring her cup though she hadn't added anything. "It's never just coffee, is it?" Her eyes flicked toward the window, where the street reflected faintly in the glass. I followed her gaze and saw my mom crossing the street. Just for a second, far off. But it was enough to make Lena's shoulders stiffen. She looked down quickly, half smiling. "Wes, that's my cue to head out." Outside, the air was damp, heavy with rain that hadn't decided to fall yet. We stood under the awning, both pretending to check the sky. "You don't owe me," I started. "I know," she cut in gently. "I just don't want this to look like something it isn't." Her phrasing caught me off guard. "What isn't it?" she sighed. "You're 25, you should be." "What?" "Interested in someone younger, someone easier to explain." She looked at me then, really looked. That slow, searching kind of look that makes you feel like you've said something you shouldn't have. Her breath hitched. Barely audible. And she turned away. "You don't understand." "Then explain it." But she didn't. She just wrapped her arms around herself, like she needed to hold something in. A moment passed, long, delicate, the kind that asks for nothing but stays anyway. I reached up, almost without thinking, and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. My hand stopped there, inches away. She didn't move, just blinked slowly, her breath uneven. For one impossible second, the space between us disappeared, the smell of rain, the faint hum of traffic, all of it folding into the quiet weight of what could happen. Then she stepped back. "I can't," she said softly. "Not yet." She walked off before I could answer, her footsteps fading into the drizzle. That night, I couldn't draw. Couldn't read. I just sat with the image of her standing there, eyes unsure, rain glinting in her hair. Almost something. Almost it had been 2 weeks. Long enough to pretend nothing had changed. Not long enough to actually believe it. I saw her again one late afternoon. Not at the cafe, but outside her shop. The front window was half covered with brown paper, a sign that read "Closed for renovation." She was locking up, hair loose this time, sleeves rolled to her elbows, paint flecks on her wrist. "You fixing it up again?" I asked. She startled, then smiled, tired but genuine. Can't help myself. Every time I think it's fine, I find another wall that needs work. I offered to help before thinking. She hesitated, then handed me a paintbrush like it was a peace offering. Inside smelled of dust and mud and cleaner. We worked quietly, our shoulders close but never touching. She painted in clean, careful strokes. I wasn't as precise, which made her laugh once. A small, bright sound that cut through the stillness. Not bad, she said, tilting her head. You missed a spot. Where? She leaned in, pointing, her hand resting lightly on my forearm for balance. The touch was brief, but something in me went very still. She noticed. Pulled back. Cleared her throat. I shouldn't have asked you to stay, she said, eyes on the wall. You didn't, I offered. That's the problem. For a while, the only sound was the soft drag of paint against plaster. Then, without looking at me, she said, Your mom called yesterday. My hand froze mid-stroke. Oh. She asked if I'd seen you around. Said you've been quiet lately. A faint smile curved her mouth. I said I hadn't. Something in her tone, not guilt exactly, but the ache of it, made my chest tighten. You lied for me. Don't make it sound like a favor. I set the brush down. Then what was it? She turned then, meeting my eyes. Her expression was calm, but her voice wasn't. I'm scared of what I want, that's what it was. It hung there between us, small, simple, enormous. I swallowed hard. And what do you want? She exhaled slowly, shaking her head. You don't ask questions like that, unless you're ready for the answer. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped a smear of paint from her palm. I wanted to take her hand, to still it. Instead, I just watched. The quiet tremor, the way her ring finger was bare. You think this is about age, she said finally. It's not, it's about time. I've lived through years you haven't even met yet. I know what people say when they see things they don't understand. And you care what they say. She looked at me then, eyes soft but pained. I care that I might ruin you for something real. I took a step closer, slow, deliberate. This feels lil. She blinked. The space between us grew smaller, charged. Her lips parted, maybe to argue, maybe to breathe. Then she whispered, barely audible, Don't. The word trembled in the air, half command, half prayer. I stopped. We stood there, paint drying on the wall behind us, hearts too loud in the silence. Her gaze flicked to my mouth, then away. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then she turned, walked to the window, and asked, quietly, almost to herself, Why does it have to feel like this? She didn't come to the cafe that week, then the next, no text, no message, nothing. I told myself to leave it alone, but the silence felt heavier than any answer could have been. I started walking past her shop again, pretending to glance at the renovation, at the new paint color, at the empty, open sign still turned the wrong way. Once, I caught a glimpse of her inside, talking to someone, a man older. Confident in the way people are when they've known your private life long enough to speak casually about it. Her hand was on the counter, his close to hers. She laughed at something he said. Not the small, shy laugh she gave me. This one was broader, practiced. The kind you use to keep things simple. I walked away before she could see me. That night, I drafted a text 3 times. Everything okay? I miss our talks. Did I do something wrong? None of them felt right. I deleted all 3 and left the phone face down. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. A few days later, she called. Not a message, an actual call. Her voice sounded thinner than usual. Hey, she said, I heard your mom's back in town. Yeah, just for the weekend. I thought maybe I'd see her. Maybe. A pause, long enough to hear both of us breathing. You saw him, she said quietly. I didn't answer. Hayes, my ex-husband, she continued. Came by to talk about selling the house. Nothing else. I almost said you don't owe me an explanation, but that would have been a lie. I wanted one. Needed one. I wasn't going to tell you, she said, voice shaking a little, because it shouldn't matter. But somehow, it was. The invisible border again, drawn in pencil but still there. Later that week, my mom invited me to dinner. Lena might stop by, she said. I almost didn't go, but I did. The evening stretched in slow, polite minutes. Conversation circling safely round food, the weather, old neighbors. When Lena arrived, She smiled at me like nothing had ever happened. I smiled back like I believed her. She sat beside my mom across from me, didn't meet my eyes once. Every now and then, her fingers brushed the edge of her glass, tracing circles. Small, nervous gestures only I would notice. When she got up to leave, she said goodbye like we were barely acquainted. "Drive safe," I murmured, and she nodded, eyes flicking toward mine just long enough to say everything and nothing. That night I opened her chat again. Typed, "You don't have to protect me from this." Then deleted it. I stared at the blinking cursor until it vanished. The message stayed unsent. The screen stayed dark. And somewhere in that half-finished silence, I realized she hadn't really left. She'd just stepped into a version of distance I didn't know how to follow. It happened on a Sunday evening. One of those soft, gray hours between daylight and dark, when the air smells like rain but doesn't commit to it. I was walking home from the market when I saw her. Standing outside her shop, lights still on inside though the door said closed. For a second, I thought about walking past, pretending not to notice. Then she looked up, her expression was tired, softer somehow. She lifted a hand uncertain, and I found myself crossing the street. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she echoed. Then, after a pause, "You look thinner." "I've been thinking." "Dangerous habit," she said, smiling faintly. Inside, the shop smelled of new paint and rain, damp wood. The shelves were bare except for a few folded linens and an old lamp still wrapped in plastic. "I'm selling," she said quietly, almost as if apologizing. "The place. Too many memories that don't behave." I nodded when, soon, the word hung in the air, final but unfinished. She sat on a stool near the counter, and I stood across from her. Close enough to touch but not close enough to try. "I shouldn't have disappeared," she said. "I thought it would make it easier." "Did it?" She shook her head. "No. It just made me miss you in quieter ways." Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers fidgeting with the edge of a cloth. I reached out, slowly, and stilled them. She didn't pull away. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time, there was no practiced distance. "You scare me," she said softly. I frowned. "Why?" "Because you make me forget how old I am when I'm with you." I almost laughed, but the ache in her voice stopped me. "You think I don't notice the way people look at us," she continued. "Your mother, the barista, even me sometimes. It's like I'm watching someone else's mistake waiting to happen." "And what if it isn't a mistake?" I asked. She exhaled, slow, heavy. "Then it's a risk. And I've already lived through too many of those that didn't end kindly." Silence filled the space between us. Long, trembling, almost tender. I stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the faint lines near her eyes, the small scar on her chin I'd never noticed before. "I don't need forever," I said quietly. "I just want to know this was real." Her eyes glistened. Not tears exactly, just something raw and human. She reached up, her palm brushing my cheek in that familiar, hesitant way. "It was," she whispered. And then she smiled, the kind that carries both goodbye and gratitude. We stood there, still touching, both knowing something had shifted, not toward something more, but toward something truer. After a while, she dropped her hand, and said, barely above a breath, "Okay." It wasn't a promise, it wasn't closure, it was enough. It's been 6 months since that night in her shop. The town looks different now, or maybe it's just me. The cafe still opens too early. The same burnt toast smell lingering in the air, the same barista who remembers my order before I speak. Sometimes I sit by the window where she used to. Out of habit, I still glance at the door whenever it opens, half expecting to see her with that quiet, unsure smile. She doesn't come often, not like before. But when she does, it feels simple, earned. Lena sold her shop a month later, moved into a smaller apartment near the edge of town. She teaches interior design part-time now, runs workshops for retirees and restless souls. Says it's a way to keep her hands busy without repainting her walls every season. We still see each other, not as often, not as cautiously. Some mornings she texts at 8:47 a.m., "Tea, not coffee today." And I go. We talk about small things, her students, my new illustrations, the strange way silence sounds different when you're not trying to fill it. Once, she mentioned she finally fixed the broken heater in her car. I told her I missed the sound it used to make. She smiled, saying, "You're probably the only one who would." There's a rhythm now. Not like before, not edged with longing or guilt, just presence. One afternoon, we sat on a bench overlooking the water. Wind in our faces, teacups cooling in our hands. She was quiet for a long time before saying, "You know, I thought I'd regret it. Everything. The cafe, the talks, you." I looked at her. "And do you?" She shook her head, eyes fixed on the horizon. "No, I think I just remember it differently now. Like it was a beginning I didn't expect." I didn't reply. Just reached over and straightened the scarf around her neck. The same one I'd stained with coffee that first week. Her fingers brushed mine, familiar, steady, still cold. I asked. "Always," she said, smiling. We sat there, not saying anything more. The waves sounded distant. The clock above the cafe struck 8:47 again. The same time it always seemed to be when something started or ended between us. Later, as we walked back, she stopped outside her building. The air smelled faintly of rain. "You should come by for dinner sometime," she said. "Nothing fancy, just something warm. Tomorrow?" I asked. She laughed. "You don't wait around, do you?" "Not for you," I said, half smiling. And she smiled back, quiet, knowing. The kind of smile that didn't promise forever, but made now feel enough. I don't know if love is supposed to look like this, quiet, practical, slightly out of order. But when she texts, "Tea at 8:47, I never hesitate. Because somewhere between regret and routine, we found something that stayed, something small, something real.